You know the Joseph story. I'll rehash the thing. Joseph was a brat. He was the favored son of Jacob because he was the son of Rachel, who was his favorite wife. Another reason not to have polygamy. And he was favored above all the others. And he was actually rather gifted in administration and various other things. He sort of became the father's spy, as well as being favored. He was given the coat of many colors, the striped coat that irritated his brothers. And he had dreams, and in these dreams he would have these interpretations. And we see Joseph here as a prototype of Joseph in the New Testament, Joseph, the foster father of Jesus, who is called and assured by a dream to take Mary as his wife, and also to go into Egypt, to flee into Egypt with his son and his wife. He's the adopted father, but adopted father is a true father. And so Joseph is the opposite happens to him. He's taken as a slave into Egypt. His brothers sell him off, and then he thinks he's out of the picture now, and then they put the coat of many colors covered with blood, so that and so they give this to Jacob, and Jacob is really upset about that the assumption is he's dead. But Joseph is favored by God, and in the house of Potiphar in Egypt, where he's sold into slavery, he becomes basically the one who's running the whole estate. But Potiphar's wife is interested in him, and he is loyal to Potiphar and won't do this, so she becomes upset and accuses him of trying to rape her. And so he's a slave, so you're not going to kill a slave if you can avoid it, because if you've paid all this money for the slave. And so he goes into what would have been slave work, imprisoned for the Pharaoh in a quarry or something like that. But instead there he also rises, and he becomes basically the administrator of the prison. And he's gifted there with dream analysis also, which was a big thing among the ancient Egyptians. And a baker and the cupbearer of the Pharaoh were there. Pharaoh meaning great house. And so it's like saying the White House. So he's the king of Egypt. As we would say, the White House, that means, everything to do with the president, I suppose. And Joseph interprets the dream, and for the baker it doesn't turn out very well, and for the cupbearer it does. But the cupbearer doesn't remember him. So he languishes again a few more years and the Pharaoh has a dream about these cattle, the 7 good cattle that are eaten up by 7 famished cattle, and also the grains, the shafts of wheat, the healthy ones are consumed by so Joseph is remembered by the cupbearer and brought in to interpret for the Pharaoh. So he does. The Pharaoh is probably in the Hyksos dynasty, who were originally probably from Canaan. So it wasn't all that unheard of for a foreigner to rise up in the court. And so he analyzes the dream and says, get ready, because there'll be 7 years of good harvest, and then there'll be 7 years of famine. So that's what happens. And so Joseph is made the administrator of the grand vizier, of the chief steward of all of Egypt. And so he averts the destruction that would have happened to the people in the famine, and even it gets things so that it even increases the Pharaoh's landholdings and his power. And so Joseph is doing very well, but the famine is not just the local famine. It's not just the Nile hasn't brought its flood the way it is. They even had these things called Nileometers that would measure how high the water went, so you could foretell. the Nile Valley was usually very predictable in its fertility, but it didn't always happen. So the foresight of Joseph has brought all this in. But Joseph always ascribes this to God. It's God who's doing this. God is the one who's on top. And so he ends up being this very important person in Egypt. Meanwhile, his family is affected in Canaan by this. They're herders, but nonetheless it's affecting them. So the boys go down to Egypt to get some provisions. And Joseph recognizes them right off, but they don't recognize him. But here, Joseph shows mercy. Instead of being someone who says, now this is my time for total revenge, and I can do everything to put them in the situation I was. But instead, he has mercy. But he does a little trick. When they go off, he puts their money back in the bag. So they come back with the money because they're coming back for the next time. And they had to leave one of the brothers there. And Joseph wants to see his brother Benjamin, who is his full brother, who was the one when his mother died in childbirth. It was with Benjamin. So that comes in, but then he puts a cup, a divining cup, actually, in that. They would have all these apparatuses trying to interpret dreams and various other things, and so that was one of his tools of his trade. So this was a great thing if it was stolen. And then he, in compassion on them, reveals himself to his brothers. And so they go and bring Jacob back. They bring Jacob back with them. And then there's this happy reunion. And so now we're on chapter 46 of Genesis. And here we're told that they're coming into Egypt. This will be their salvation. But of course we know the rest of the story, that when the Hyksos were overthrown and there was the restoration of the native dynasties, the foreigners were mistreated. In fact, the Israelites are enslaved. So it starts out, Israel, that is Jacob, that's his name, the name God gave him, the one who struggles with God. Israel set out with all that was his. And when he arrived at Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Of course, there's no Cohen priesthood yet for doing the sacrifices. And so the patriarch, the father of the family, is doing the sacrifices to God. To the God of his father Isaac, it's told, because this God is a personal God. But he's the family God as well. It's not just for an individual, although he is here named as the God of Isaac, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but he's the God of Israel as a whole. And we know that he's the God, with a capital G, the God of all the earth. And through Abraham, we will be all joined together. Therefore, God, speaking of Israel in a vision by night, because Jacob had received visions also, before, remember, at Bethel, with the ladder there, or the ziggurat, the angels going up and down there, and his wrestling, where he got his name, Israel. Jacob, he's called, not Israel, Israel. Here I am. We are also called to that when God calls on us, to say, here I am, ready to do his will, which we can only do by the power of his grace. But God is more than eager to bestow that on us. So as all the prophets, Isaiah and others say, God says, who will go with me? Here I am. So rather than volunteering other people for what we're called to do, we're called to go in our vocation there, following the Lord. Then he said, I am God, Elohim, the God of your father, Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you a great nation. Not only will I go down to Egypt with you, I will also bring you back here after Joseph has closed your eyes. That's when he dies. And many of the pagan people had the concept that their gods were local gods. The Baal of this place, or that, a god of this spring, a god of this rock, a god of this tree. But God, the true God, is universal. And you can't get away from him. That he is with us wherever we go. So Jacob departed from Beersheba with the sons of Israel. And the sons of Israel put their father and their wives and children on the wagons that Pharaoh had sent for his transport. That was a thing that the Hyksos brought into Egypt, chariots, horses, chariots. That was one of the reasons they got to conquer the Delta region. So Pharaoh had sent for his transport. So they're going, the equivalent of limousines and U-Hauls being sent to them. They took with them their livestock and the possessions they had acquired in the land of Canaan. Thus Jacob and all his descendants migrated to Egypt. His sons and his grandsons, his daughters and his granddaughters, all his descendants, he took with him to Egypt. And then there's a list of the names of the Israelites, the descendants of Jacob, who went with him, starting with the firstborn Reuben and his family, and Levi and his family, and Judah. It's Judah who will be the one who's given the promise. The promise will descend from him. It's from him the Messiah will come, rather than from the firstborn. Just as in the case of Jacob, it was Jacob who was the one to whom the promise would go, not Esau. So then all of these different sons and the Issachar, his son Zebulun, and so that was it. The sons of Gad, all of these folk. And then, so they go on, the list goes on. And these were very important to the people, especially after the exile in Babylon. Because you could say, I'm the son of so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, proving your lineage, that you were an Israelite. Because there could be this intermarriage later, an absorption. So to show that, after the exile, showing that you had a true bloodline was considered very important for them. So then, it said Israel had sent. It said Israel. This is verse 26. Israel's people who migrated to Egypt, his direct descendants, not counting the wives of Jacob's sons, numbered 66 persons in all. Together with Joseph's sons who were born to him in Egypt, 2 persons, all the people comprising Jacob's family who had come to Egypt amounted to 70 persons. So 70 is an auspicious number. 70, it's a number of fullness, one of the numbers of fullness. So Israel had sent Judah ahead to Joseph so that he might meet him in Goshen. On his arrival in the region of Goshen, Joseph hitched the horses to his chariot and rode to meet his father Israel in Goshen. So that must have been quite a sight, this very regal presence of the Grand Vizier in his chariot. So chariots were very cherished in the New Kingdom, which isn't this isn't the New Kingdom yet. So King Tut is buried with chariots and all that. So this was something. So that on his arrival, Joseph hitched the horses to his chariot and rode to meet his father Israel in Goshen. As soon as he saw him, he flung himself on his neck and wept a long time in his arms. And Israel said to Joseph, "At last I can die, now that I have seen for myself that Joseph is still alive." And then Joseph said to his brothers and his father's household, "I will go and inform Pharaoh, telling him, my brothers and my father's household, whose home is in the land of Canaan, have come to me. The men are shepherds, having long been keepers of livestock, and they have brought with them their flocks and herds, as well as everything else they own. So this was, to prepare this, that they would share Pharaoh's favor, being the family of Joseph. So when Pharaoh summons you and asks what your occupation is, you must answer, we, your servants, like our ancestors, have been keepers of livestock from the beginning until now, in order that you may stay in the land of Goshen, since all shepherds are abhorrent to the Egyptians. So agriculture was the cultivated occupation for the lower people. And even on the tombs, again, they would be often the person who's buried, who is a person of wealth and influence, was sometimes shown planting or harvesting, and that hunting too. But I'm not aware of any that show the main occupant of the tomb shepherding or herding cattle. So that's chapter 46. Well, thank you very much for our little visit here with the Bible study. This is the office that I share with some others here, and we have a lot of things people have given us over the years, as well as things that go way back that's been in here. We see all these photos here of folk here, and this is where our resurrection icon is for the rest of the year outside of Paschal time. And there's a Duret print of the finding of the Christ child in the desert, a copy of a copy of a copy, of course. And that's my class of 1979 when we were ordained. And there's me and Father Cuddy, if you remember Father Cuddy, and then Father Darmarat there, and then some others you might know. Father Di Lorenzo, Father McNamara, Michael McNamara, other things people have given us over the years here. The St. Francis banner, and the record album, our record album, that in 1977 at the seminary, and that's me there in the corner. My sister Mary kept this. So, and this is Mr. Crimmi's crucifix, mirror crucifix there. Pope Leo XIII, painting there of him. All these other things here. A boy drew this in the 7th grade a few years ago. It's supposed to be me. I think it's me with the CPAP machine on there. There it is. And there's a family picture here. A reunion a number of years ago. Here we are. Here's another family picture. That's the thing from 1964. That's me in 1964. And this is my brother Joey, whose birthday is today, with my mother there, my sister Mary, my sister Margaret, my brother Mikey, there in 1964. I didn't draw, my sister Mary wrote the 1964 on it. Well, that's that. Well, thank you very much for this little Bible study. So we'll do this again next Tuesday, and until we can come together as a class here in the rectory. Bye now.